Welcome back, players, to a new video. Feels almost nostalgic at this point. You read the title. Today we will talk about Feywild Visitor. I've decided to divide the presentation into 5 bullets. We will discuss the strengths and weaknesses of our commander, the strategy of the deck, of course the deck list, an example of starting hand, and some adaptation to transform this deck from a one-of-one focused list for a dual Pauper EDH environment to a deck that can really hold its own into a multiplayer setting. Let's start this off by talking about our commander, of course. As you can see, is a 5 mana 3/4 Orc Wizard. Read. When Feywild Caretaker enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature token with flying. If you are not familiar with the initiative mechanic, I will read it for you. Whenever one or more creature or player control deal combat damage to you, that player takes the initiative. Whenever you take the initiative and at the beginning of your upkeep, venture into the Undercity. On the right, you can see the Undercity dungeon. I want to talk first about the stats of our commander. So 5 mana is a lot for Pauper Dual Commander standards, but you also get a 3/4, which is pretty big, considering that red removal in particular, it's up to 3. So if your opponent really wants to remove this commander and they're not in black, they probably need to sacrifice a creature and use a removal, which is already a good deal for us. Also, it's worth noting that during my testing, your opponent will tend not to kill your commander as often as you imagine, since having a commander with a strong ATB effect creates this cognitive dissonance in your opponent's mind. So basically, what I mean by that, if they remove your commander, you can cast it again and getting further in the Undercity. They don't remove your commander, you will still get the fairy creature token, which doesn't seem much, but trust me, it's an evasive threat on its own. Our deck is built to play a slow and control game. And it's not really hard to accumulate 3 or 4 dragon creature token onto the field. And swinging your opponent for 4 each turn really adds up quickly. I have highlighted the Undercity preferred path. You can pause the video to read of the room. I will go through them really quickly. So, secret entrance, you can grab a land out of your deck. This is really nice since we want to hit all of our land drops and hold some mana open for interaction, of course. Lost Well allow us to arrange the first part of our deck, making sure that we are getting the best interaction that we can have to answer our opponent's threats. Stash get us a treasure token, so more mana is always good. Catacombs help us to pressure our opponent life total. As I said earlier, this is a deck that wants to establish its own pace, a slow one, but we still want to kill our opponent, of course, and also we can't be so delusional. We won't have the best board presence ever. So getting a 4/1 skeleton token with menace, getting a flyer. All these evasive creatures help us to get back the initiative when and if our opponent steals it to us. And of course, the ultimate Throne of the Dead 3, reveal the top 10 cards of our library, put a creature card from among them onto the field with 3+1/+1 counter. It gains X+ until the next turn, then shuffle. This room really shaped up this deck in a more unconventional way respect the other control list that you can find. As you have already understood, this is of course a control list, and well, we annoy our opponent in every way possible. On the stack with counterspell, on the board with bounce effect or auras that can disable any possible threats. And now you have probably read the slide and making fun of my sarcasm, but yeah, this is truly the plan. Other than annoying our opponent, we will grant value with some efficient and valuable spells, and of course the initiative that our commander grants to us. I have divided the deck in a few categories. I won't show you each card that I put in the deck. If you want to take a look at the deck list, you can find it in the description box down below. Let's start this off with the synergy cards. These are cards that helps us to get through the Undercity quicker. I want to point out especially Planetary Incision and the other blink effect that can provide also protection. So if I have my commander on the field and an opponent try to cast a removal, I don't know, go for the throat, instead of simply countering it with the negate, I will cast Planetary Incision. This will save my commander, buff it with a +1/+1 counter, and also helps us to get to a new room. Being a control list, we are packed with the interaction in the form of counterspell, single target removal. In this case, Witness Protection is a great card. If you are not playing it, you are missing out. And also, it's not really popular archetype in Pauper Dual Commander, but there are few tokens generator, so Echoing True really helps us in those situations. There is nothing more blue than drawing cards, but of course card advantage is not the only way to get further than your opponent. This is why I call this category resource advantage. What I mean by that? Yeah, sure, you can draw cards, but there are other ways that you can accumulate advantage over your opponent. Here I want to highlight Secret Door. This 1 mana defender has an interesting ability. For 5 mana you can venture into a dungeon. So I could play in the deck multiple cards that venture into the dungeon, but this little defender can replace all of them. Another example of 2-for-1 is World Ghost Serpent. It's a great fatty that we love to see on the top of our deck whenever we get into the Throne of the Dead 3, but I can also cast it for 2 on the adventure side. As I spoiled before, this is not your conventional control list. The last room of the Undercity really gives you the imprint of playing more creatures. So aside from the usual suspect of Agor of Bolas, the Archaeologist, Archomancer, we can find beneath it Infiltrator, a 3 mana 1/4 unblockable. This will help us to steal back the initiative, but also it's a great blocker against aggressive decks. I want also to highlight Mirror Share Crab, that usually don't get much play and wouldn't in this deck for the plain stats and protection. A 7 mana 7/5 with Ward 3 is nothing truly amazing, but it has also an activate ability. We can discard it by paying 3 and counter a spell or ability unless its controller pays 3. So this is basically a mana leak on a creature, which is also fatty. Perfect for this deck. I like it when I find it in my hand, knowing that I can interact with my opponent, and also countering an ability, which is something that we don't really see a lot of. If your opponent has a commander like ours with an amazing ETB effect and you have this in hand, you are happy about it, knowing that your opponent commander is effectively a vanilla creature. Also, when I flip Mirror Share Crab on the top of my deck, when I reach the last room of Undercity, I will have on the field an 8/10 Ward 3 creature. Trust me, it ends game really quickly. I wanted also to include an example of starting hand. So of course we will have a few lands, since our commander is pricey, so we don't want to miss land drop. And in particular, Crystal Grotto, I won't ever recommend you to run this in multicolor decks, but in monocolor deck, the Scry one can be pretty handy. We have some early blocker in Secret Doors, cheap removal in Vapor Snag, some form of card advantage in Think Twice, and also interaction on the stack with Lost Focus. This is a generic good hand. Of course, if your opponent is playing some aggressive deck, you would love to have more Vapor Snag and early blockers. While if your opponent is also playing a control list, more card draw and counterspell are needed. I need to do a disclaimer before explaining this slide. I'm not saying to strictly replace Peek with Keep Watch if you're gonna play this deck in a multiplayer environment. I want you to understand the thought process behind it and making sure that you get the most out of the deck when you play it. So when you are dueling against one other opponent and your start life total is 25, aggressive deck are really a threat, and you will find a lot of them. For this reason, even if you are playing a control list, your mana curve will be extremely low. And for this reason, I include cards like Hard Evidence and Summon. Also, knowing what your opponent is about to do is key, and Pick is a great card at that. But when you are playing against 3 other players and their life total is 30, aggressive deck doesn't really have a chance. You will probably find more mid-rangey, grindier deck at the table, and for this reason you can play more impactful and pricier spell. Also, it's worth noting that initiative is a really good mechanic. Your opponent will want it, and so playing more creature, and in the case of Manowar, creatures that can interact with your opponent will be fundamental. Also, if you are in a meta full of tokens or really creature heavy, cards like Keep Watch will make you draw a ton of cards, much more than any other 1-mana cantrip can. I also wanted to highlight Capsize and Wondrous Ornament, since multiplayer games tend to go for a long time and you will probably accumulate some excessive mana. Being able to sink all the mana into some cards or spells will get you further. Today we have been gifted with all the spoiler of the new Ixalan, and I want to show you guys these 3 commons that I saw. Let me know what you think about them. Would you include it in the list? I'm personally really interested in the Island Suckers, since you can suck it away in the earlier turn to get maybe Mystic Sanctuary, but also I wouldn't mind to flip it on top of my deck.